on a dark night in November 2017, a year following the explosive revelations of the Panama Papers. But as autumn arrived, so did another financial bombshell, the Paradise Papers. This time, millions of confidential documents from Appleby, a prestigious offshore law firm, were leaked. The media response was immediate and widespread. Major news outlets like The Guardian, BBC, and the New York Times obtained access to these secret files, revealing the financial dealings of numerous high-profile individuals and corporations. But in contrast to the Panama Papers, there seemed to be a sudden drop in public interest. Why did coverage of the Paradise Papers wane? One possible reason was that the revelations didn't contain the same salacious details as the Panama Papers had, no political leaders creating secret offshore companies for hiding ill-gotten gains. However, the Paradise Papers still exposed a systemic problem with global finance. The leaked documents highlighted how corporations and wealthy people exploit tax loopholes and shift money between countries to minimize their tax bills, often at the expense of middle-class taxpayers. For example, Apple Inc., one of the world's most valuable companies, reportedly moved tens of billions in profits to the tax haven of Jersey to avoid paying billions in taxes. But despite its impact on global finance and governance, the Paradise Papers didn't generate the same level of outrage or media attention as the Panama Papers. Perhaps it was because these practices are more accepted or normalized, making them less captivating. Or maybe it was due to journalists struggling to present complex financial machinations in an accessible way. Nonetheless, the Paradise Papers investigation is a crucial piece of journalism that sheds light on a murky area of finance and power. While the media might have tried to bury this story, its impact continues to reverberate in the world of offshore finance and tax policy. 2017 saw the unveiling of another major global investigation known as the Paradise Papers. This explosive exposé involved an unprecedented leak of 13.4 million financial documents, revealing the offshore activities of some of the world's most powerful politicians, celebrities, and corporations. The international consortium of investigative journalists led this massive undertaking, with over 90 media partners contributing to its success. However, unlike the initial wave of shock and outrage that followed the Panama Papers, the Paradise Papers seem to have fallen off the public radar rather quickly. Many experts attribute this decline in interest to the sheer complexity of offshore finance and taxation policies. The labyrinthine networks of shell companies, trusts, and subsidiaries can be difficult for audiences to grasp, making it challenging for journalists to present these intricate machinations in an engaging yet accurate manner. But let's not forget that the Paradise Papers investigation uncovered some staggering facts. Apple secretly shifted billions of dollars offshore after Ireland tightened tax laws. The Queen's private estate invested in a Cayman Islands fund. Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross held stakes in a shipping firm linked to a Russian oligarch targeted by U.S. sanctions. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's top advisor was involved in offshore schemes. These revelations rocked the world of high finance and exposed questionable practices that continue to erode public trust in governments and institutions. Yet, there has been a noticeable lack of follow-up investigations or policy changes since these disclosures. One possible explanation is that powerful entities implicated in the Paradise Papers have successfully lobbied against regulatory reforms, maintaining the status quo. The sheer scale of offshore finance also makes it difficult for individual countries to enforce new rules unilaterally. This lack of political will and international cooperation enables these shadowy practices to persist relatively unchecked. In conclusion, while the media might have moved on from the Paradise Papers, its impact on our understanding of offshore finance and taxation policies remains significant. As financial investigative journalists, it's our responsibility to ensure that stories like this continue to be told, even if mainstream outlets have grown weary of their complexity. The public deserves to know how their money is being used, manipulated, and hidden, and who stands to gain from such practices. 2017 saw another major leak in the world of offshore finance following the heels of the Panama Papers. This time, it was the Paradise Papers that came to light, revealing a staggering 13.4 million documents detailing the offshore activities of some of the wealthiest individuals and corporations around the globe. These papers exposed the inner workings of the offshore financial system, pulling back the curtain on how money is moved beyond the reach of tax authorities and regulatory scrutiny. The Paradise Papers investigation was led by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists in collaboration with more than 90 media partners from around the world. Among those implicated in the leak were high-profile politicians, celebrities, and business leaders, including Queen Elizabeth II, U.S. Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, and a host of well-known corporations like Apple, Nike, and Facebook. One of the most prominent stories to emerge from the Paradise Papers centered on Wilbur Ross's ties to Russian shipping company Navigator Holdings. The documents revealed that Ross had retained substantial investments in Navigator via offshore entities even after becoming a public official. This revelation raised concerns about potential conflicts of interest, as Navigator also counted among its top clients a subsidiary of the Russian energy giant Gazprom, a firm subject to U.S. sanctions. Another notable figure mentioned in the Paradise Papers was Queen Elizabeth II, whose private estate had invested millions in offshore accounts and companies. Although these investments were not illegal, they highlighted the British monarchy's entanglement in the shadowy world of offshore finance. The Paradise Papers also shone a light on the tax avoidance strategies of major corporations like Apple and Nike. Apple, for instance, moved its $250 billion cash reserve to the tiny island nation of Jersey following criticism over its tax practices. Meanwhile, Nike was found to have funneled earnings from its European operations through a subsidiary in the Netherlands, allowing it to avoid paying taxes on more than $1 billion between 2006 and 2015. Despite the mainstream media's apparent lack of interest in these stories, the Paradise Papers serve as an important reminder that the world of offshore finance remains riddled with complex networks designed to obscure the movement of money and evade regulatory scrutiny. As investigative journalists, it is our responsibility to continue uncovering these stories, ensuring that the public remains informed about how their money is being used and manipulated by those in positions of power. The Paradise Papers, unraveling the financial structures and schemes used by those implicated in this massive data leak, sheds light on just how convoluted and intricate the world of offshore finance can be. Take, for instance, the case of Nike, which established a subsidiary in the Netherlands called Nike European Operations Netherlands (BV) in 2017. Neon then issued shares worth $1.3 billion to another Dutch entity, Nike Innovate CV, which was owned by the Cayman Islands-based Nike Investment LLC. What this complex web of subsidiaries and shell companies effectively did was allow Nike to avoid paying taxes on royalties from its intellectual properties in European markets. This scheme highlights how multinational corporations exploit legal loopholes in international tax laws, often through the use of offshore financial structures. Now let's turn our attention to the case of Wilbur Ross, the United States Secretary of Commerce under President Donald Trump. The Paradise Papers revealed that Ross had a stake in Navigator Holdings, a shipping firm that counts among its biggest clients a Russian energy company named Sibor. Here's where things get interesting. Two major shareholders of Sibor are none other than Vladimir Putin's son-in-law and a close associate of the Russian president. By investing in Navigator Holdings through a chain of offshore companies, Ross benefited financially from his association with a firm linked to powerful individuals within the Russian government, all while maintaining a veneer of separation. These examples serve as stark reminders that the world of offshore finance is not only murky, but also fraught with moral hazards and potential conflicts of interest. In our pursuit of transparency, we must continue to expose these complex networks, ensuring that those who seek to exploit them for personal gain are held accountable. The trail of money may be long and winding, but it's one we're committed to following wherever it leads. 2016, the year of the Paradise Papers leak. Over half a terabyte of confidential documents from Appleby, a prestigious offshore law firm, were made public. This followed closely on the heels of the Panama Papers scandal in 2016, the year of the Paradise Papers leak. Over half a terabyte of confidential documents from Appleby, a prestigious offshore law firm, were made public. This followed closely on the heels of the Panama Papers scandal in 2015, and just like its predecessor, the Paradise Papers exposed the financial dealings of some of the world's most powerful individuals and corporations. But there's something you might not know about the Paradise Papers. Despite their explosive revelations, they received a fraction of the media attention that the Panama Papers did. Why is that? The answer lies in the role of powerful interests in shaping media narratives. You see, while the Panama Papers were investigated and published by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, the Paradise Papers were also obtained by the ICIJ. But when it came time to release the stories, something changed. The ICIJ partnered with The Guardian and The New York Times on the Panama Papers, but for the Paradise Papers, they chose to work with the BBC and The New York Times instead. This decision had significant consequences. While The Guardian and The New York Times had a track record of holding power to account, the BBC and The New York Times were more cautious in their reporting. The result was that the Paradise Papers received less coverage and less scrutiny than the Panama Papers did. But it didn't stop there. According to internal documents obtained by the ICIJ, Appleby hired a public relations firm to shape the narrative around the leak. The firm, called Bell Pottinger, had a history of working for authoritarian regimes and was later caught running a racist disinformation campaign in South Africa. Bell Pottinger's strategy was to downplay the significance of the Paradise Papers and to shift the focus away from the individuals and corporations named in the documents. They encouraged journalists to write about the technical aspects of offshore finance rather than the human cost of tax evasion and money laundering. And it worked. The media narrative around the Paradise Papers was muted, and many of the stories that were published focused on the mechanics of offshore finance, rather than the individuals and corporations who use these structures to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. The Paradise Papers leak is a textbook example of how powerful interests can shape media narratives to suit their own needs. By choosing which journalists to work with and by hiring PR firms to manage the narrative, they were able to minimize the fallout from the leak and protect their own reputations. But we cannot let them get away with it. As investigative journalists, it's our job to follow the money, wherever it leads, and to hold those in power accountable for their actions. The trail of money may be long and winding, but it's one we're committed to following, no matter how many obstacles are put in our way. $300 million. That's the amount one American billionaire investor, Wilbur Ross, was found to have hidden in a network of offshore companies. This revelation came as part of the Paradise Papers leak, an expose that revealed the financial secrets of some of the world's most powerful individuals and corporations. But despite the damning evidence, many of those implicated were able to minimize the fallout from the leak and protect their own reputations. As investigative journalists, it's our job to follow the money, wherever it leads, and to hold those in power accountable for their actions. The trail of money may be long and winding, but it's one we're committed to following, no matter how many obstacles are put in our way. The Paradise Papers revealed a web of financial secrecy that spans the globe, from the tropical shores of the Cayman Islands to the towering skyscrapers of Hong Kong. The leak exposed how the rich and powerful use offshore companies to hide their wealth, avoid taxes, and skirt regulations. But the true scandal is not just the actions of those implicated in the leak, it's the system that allows them to get away with it. Financial secrecy has real-world consequences. It undermines trust in our institutions, stifles economic development, and exacerbates inequality. And while the Paradise Papers may have shed light on some of the worst offenders, there are countless more who remain hidden in the shadows. That's why it's so important that we continue to scrutinize the world of finance, to expose wrongdoing, and to demand accountability. We must not let those in power hide behind a veil of secrecy, protecting their wealth and avoiding scrutiny. As investigative journalists, we have a responsibility to shine a light on the darkest corners of the financial world, to follow the money wherever it leads, and to hold those in power accountable for their actions. The trail may be long and winding, but it's one we're committed to following, no matter how many obstacles are put in our way. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about exposing individual cases of wrongdoing, it's about creating a more just and equitable society for all. And that's a goal worth fighting for, no matter how difficult the journey may be.